Michigan, Abdul El-Sayed. Abdul, thanks so much for joining me.
Brian, it's always a privilege, just not with news like this.
So, to that point, we have gotten news that Florida is going to work to eliminate all childhood vaccine mandates in the state. So, first and foremost, your reaction to this move, and right off the top, can you give folks who are watching who don't know you a little update in terms of your background?
Yeah, so Brian, I'm a physician epidemiologist. I rebuilt Detroit's health department as health commissioner, most recently served Wayne County's Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services and its 1.8 million people, leading public health for communities across our state. And as a former health director, here's the thing I want everybody to understand. But, I could come at you as a public health doctor, but really just as a dad. When kids are born, their immune systems are not fully developed. And we can't even immunize them for these diseases that we protect folks from via vaccines, things like measles or mumps or rubella or polio, until they've matured to a certain level. And so we require people to be vaccinated because we understand that these are killer diseases and that when more people are vaccinated, the probability that people who cannot get vaccinated, whose immune systems cannot protect them, are protected against these diseases because of what we do as a society collectively. And for anybody in the name of public health to eliminate vaccine mandates is literally putting our most vulnerable people at risk of diseases who decades ago our grandparents would have looked at and said, "Oh my God, what are you guys thinking?" And, I think about my own grandparents who lined up for the Salk vaccine for polio.
Yeah.
And I think, imagine what their parents would think that if half a century later, their grandkids and their great grandkids would be turning against these incredible forms of technology that have saved literally millions and millions of lives. It makes zero sense to me.
What do you attribute the hostility to?
I think there's a profound amount of disinformation out there about vaccines. I think that much is obvious. But I think what you've got is a movement of people that want to tell you that the things that protect you are actually dangerous and the things that can hurt you are actually benign and safe.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You think about somebody like Joseph Ladapo, and you think about what he is trying to warn you against. This is a guy who went to Harvard Medical School. He knows better, but he's trying to tell you that somehow the vaccines that have protected your parents and your parents' parents and should be protecting your kids are hurting you. And I don't see him talking about alligator Alcatraz and the fact that our government is currently making it possible to kidnap you off the streets without telling you who they are or why they're kidnapping you, just on the assertion that perhaps you may not be here legally. And the notion that as a public health official, you want people not to have to get vaccinated, but you're perfectly okay with involuntary detention of people in your own backyard says everything I need to know about your values and your understanding of what it means to live in a society where we protect ourselves and protect each other.
So I want to put a clip right here on the screen of the Florida Surgeon General, who you were just alluding to, a comment that he made in an attempt to justify this move.
Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery. Okay? Who am I as a government or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now to tell you what you should put in your body?
So his claim here is that somehow the vaccine mandates are akin to slavery. Can I just have your general reaction to this?
Yeah, slavery is when somebody can force you to do things with your body that you have no choice to do. And this is about protecting everybody as a collective from diseases that killed millions of people. Those two things are not the same. And the tell here is that slavery is about things like involuntary detention or forcing people because of the color of their skin to work in servitude to other people. And this very same individual has said not a peep about the ways that ICE is being used to steal people off the streets, mainly based on whether or not they fit a profile,
Yeah.
which is, of course, about the color of their skin. And so I find it not just disingenuous, but insulting to the memory of slavery that you would compare vaccines that we developed as a society and that have protected millions upon millions of our children so that they could live out the length of their lives and have the full ownership of healthy bodies throughout the length of their lives. that you would compare that to slavery when you're failing to take on the way that government is now literally robbing people of the use of their own bodies as a function of whether or not they fit a profile and the color of their skin. It says all you need to know about what values are driving this.
What do you say to folks in other states who may look at this and say, okay, well, at a bare minimum, at least this is just happening in Florida. And so, whether I live in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, or whether I live in New York, New Jersey, or California, I'm probably okay because look how far away this is. What would you say to those folks in light of the move that we're seeing in Florida right now?
Look, I really wish that were true, but ideas, as the internet has shown us, also go viral. And what this does is it platforms a disinformation about quote unquote risk when it comes to vaccines that is furthering the kind of disinformation we saw really take hold during the pandemic, which is telling people that they should not vaccinate or that maybe they don't have to. And when that happens, more people all over the country choose not to vaccinate. And when that happens, we're creating space for the spread of viruses. You think about measles outbreaks, right? The idea that fewer people are going to get vaccinated in Florida increases the probability that you have measles outbreaks out of Florida. Now, we all know that viruses travel pretty quickly, particularly in the era of air travel. And now that you have folks across different communities who are listening to this disinformation and potentially making really hazardous choices, the probability that a measles outbreak in a place like Florida can then travel and infect susceptible people in your community and therefore expose your kids, that just went up. And so, unfortunately, infectious diseases teach us that we're all connected. And the thing that increases the probability that viruses go viral is the mis and disinformation that has gone viral, that has told folks that somehow the way to protect themselves is not to take vaccines that were developed specifically to protect people from these exact diseases.
So you're obviously running for Senate in Michigan. How would you use your place in government if you're elected to push back against this kind of this whole new slew of disinformation as it relates to medicine and vaccines specifically?
Yeah, this move in Florida comes on the heels of great destruction of the CDC that has been dealt at the hands of RFK Jr., a guy who literally you wouldn't want to have to partner with in science class because he's more likely to light his own hair on fire than actually achieve the goals of the experiment you're supposed to do. And the Trump administration writ large and the destruction of our public health agencies. That is a national security issue that we are not soon going to recover from. And so as a U.S. Senator, as the only U.S. Senator who would be a physician epidemiologist who's served as the health commissioner in a local community, I recognize that A, we have to hold RFK Jr. accountable. I can't wait to haul his ass up and A, ask him how he got a brain worm, but B, ask him why the hell he thinks it's okay to put us all in great harm by devastating the public health infrastructure that has protected us in so many ways for so long. And then B, once we beat Donald Trump in 2028 in the MAGA movement, we're going to need leaders who have the understanding to be able to build what we need. And let's be clear, right? HHS hasn't been what it ought to be for a very long time. It hasn't been purpose fit. The answer isn't to destroy it and to try and lead according to some brainworm ideology instead of science. The answer is that it needed the kind of purposive reform that it deserves, that the American public deserves. And I think if there's any silver lining in this cloud, it's that we have an opportunity to build the kind of HHS, the kind of Food and Drug Administration, the kind of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the kind of National Institutes of Health that we as a country need for the 21st century. And I believe that my skill set puts me in a good position to be able to lead at the helm of doing that. Now, as a country, we have to decide that science has given us a lot of pretty great things. Like I get to talk to you from a room in Michigan and you're in a room in California. We get to talk in real time. That's because of science. And that's the same scientific process that delivered vaccines that teach our immune systems how to defeat measles or defeat polio the minute we might be exposed to that virus. It's the same scientific process. And so the other part of this here is just fundamental science literacy, right? And as someone who spent a lot of time in school, I think one of the big challenges we've had is that we have not really invested in the kind of science literacy that everybody should have as a function of graduating from high school in this country, graduating from sixth grade in this country. And clearly RFK Jr., that both missed him, but it shouldn't be missing our kids. And so investing in the kind of education children need and deserve, I think that's part and parcel of building the kind of America where we understand the value of science rather than destroy scientific institutions.
You'd mentioned that if you're in the U.S. Senate, you would be the only epidemiologist in the Senate. There is another physician in the Senate, and that's Bill Cassidy. And ironically enough, he voted to confirm RFK Jr. when he had the power, had he opted not to vote for him, to prevent our health and human services sector, the CDC, and all of the other agencies beneath it, from being under the leadership of RFK Jr. And so, in light of what we're seeing right now, how do you think of this physician and senator who opted to hand over control of the entire health and human services sector over to somebody like RFK Jr.?
The last time I was at the U.S. Senate, I was invited to testify about medical debt erasure. And I got to meet Bill Cassidy. He's a smart guy, and he is a trained physician, and he knows better. And so when people know better and still make a bad decision, to me, it comes down to one thing, which is political cowardice. And we've seen that kind of political cowardice fully take over Republicans in both houses of Congress. But I got to wonder, right? If you're somebody who spent 4 years learning how to be a caretaker of people and an arbiter of scientific fact, how you sell that away just because you're afraid of what Donald Trump might do in your office, how you put somebody in a position of power whose ideology is inconsistent with everything you've ever learned and everything you've ever practiced, and you put them in a position to do something like destroy the incredible public health infrastructure that we have in this country. And I want to be clear, I definitely disagreed with the way that the CDC led during the COVID pandemic. I did not think that they were providing the kind of leadership to the level that I knew they could. But I also know all the other things that the CDC does and all the ways they protect us in ways we don't even see. All the folks working in the bio labs to understand the infectious diseases that could affect us. All of the folks working in emergency response to take on measles outbreaks all over the country when they happen. All of the folks in the epidemiology and intelligence service who are out there providing incredible insight to people who do public health on the ground in communities like Detroit and Wayne County, where I served. And the notion that in a once in a lifetime pandemic, right, we could have wanted more from the CDC should be a reason you invest more in the CDC and provide it with even better leadership, not a reason why you tear it down. Because guess what? It's not like the infectious diseases are back there thinking, well, we already gave them COVID, so maybe we should wait a while.
Right.
That's not how these things work. And so we are at risk. And I would tell you, we are far worse risk today than we were in December of 2019, right? And I think that should give us all pause. Like I said, this is a national security issue. And somebody like Bill Cassidy should have had the wherewithal to put his training, his knowledge, his understanding, and his commitment to the American people in the oath that he took over putting somebody like RFK Jr. In a position to take a wrecking ball to an agency as important as the CDC.
Well, not just the oath he took as a U.S. senator, but also the Hippocratic Oath, which is to first do no harm. And putting somebody like RFK Jr. in charge of our nation's health apparatus does the exact opposite. And that's playing out very predictably as we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I took the same oath. And, it's an amazing thing, right? Like, you expect a doctor to take that oath and take that oath seriously, certainly when they're seeing their patients. But almost every doctor I've ever met who's run for office, and I've met several of them by virtue of the fact that I'm a doctor who's running for office.
Yeah.
They see their political work as a logical extension.
Yeah.
We see our political work as a logical extension of the work that we do taking care of people in our communities. And the notion that somehow you would put your worries and your anxiety about what Donald Trump might say about you ahead of that commitment betrays the reason you ran for office in the first place. And someday somebody's gonna have to explain to me what's so great about being a U.S. senator. I mean, like, part of me is like, I'm gonna have to go hang out with people like Bill Cassidy and Chuck Grassley. Like, I don't see that as a walk in the park or a joyful afternoon. So, like, what's so important about keeping your seat that you're going to literally give up on the reason you took the seat in the first place, which is to protect the public's health, which is to invest in a better, more secure America? I can't understand it.
Well, look, I know that I speak on behalf of everybody who's watching right now in saying, like, in a world where all of the headlines betray so much insanity as it relates to healthcare. To hear you speaking about this in a way that is sane and rational and reasonable is a breath of fresh air. And I know that the crazy voices often rise to the top because that's what breaks through in our media ecosystem. But it is exactly listening to you in a moment like this that kind of restores a little bit of faith in humanity. And look, I say that as the son of 2 registered nurses. So I appreciate the time today. One last thing for folks who are looking to help your campaign, what can they do?
Yeah, they can go to abdulforsenate.com. And Brian, I appreciate you ending on that last note because, your parents went to work every day to take care of people, and
Yeah.
we owe them a debt of gratitude for the work that they do, and we owe them not to make their jobs harder and more dangerous. And I worry that that's the other side of it, is that we are making it harder to provide care when we create a world where people are more likely to get sick. And that's the reason I'm running, which is I would rather live in a world where when people get sick, they get the healthcare they need, but that we are doing the work to protect them from getting sick in the first place. And I think that's the thing that brings us to this work. And so I just really appreciate you creating a platform to have a sane and honest conversation about what this is and what the risks are. And I'm grateful always to get to join you in conversation.
Well, thanks so much. Again, for those who are watching right now, if you'd like to donate, I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Abdul, thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you.